Lupus LA would like to thank our generous sponsors for their support of the Your Story, Our Fight podcast. Gemini Beauty believes in beauty for a cause, and in their case, the cause is lupus. The team at Gemini is changing the skincare game for good. We thank GSK for their focus on autoimmune disease and their continued support of Lupus LA. Hello and welcome to another episode of the Lupus LA podcast, Your Story, Our Fight. I'm your host, Adam Selkowitz, and as always, I want to thank our sponsors, GSK and Gemini Beauty, for allowing us to tell incredible stories. And today we have one that's close to my heart because Mercedes and I have known each other a very, very long time. And I want to introduce you to Mercedes Yvette, who probably doesn't need much of an introduction to the lupus community. You all got to hear her story as she came out on national television during her time on America's Next Top Model. And she's an actor, a model. She has this crazy new career in sales that we're going to talk about. But welcome to the podcast, Mercedes.
Oh, it's such an honor. Thank you so much for having me and allowing me to share my story and also everything that you do for the lupus community. So thank you.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that. I think you and I met right around the time the show was airing, and I know it was a crazy, crazy time for you. But tell me, I think a little bit. Let's go before you were on the show and talk a little bit about sort of how you grew up and how your lupus started to manifest itself.
Yeah, I grew up in New Jersey. Represent to all my East Coasters. Woo, woo.
That's right.
I've been living out in California long enough to call myself a Californian. So I would say I was in high school and I played basketball and ran track. And my mom kept thinking I had mono, and she was just like wondering what was going on. And I was like, I don't know, like I work 2 jobs. I play basketball. Like I do a lot of things. I'm tired all the time. And, come to find out those were precursors for lupus. But, then I went into college and decided to pursue my dream of becoming America's Next Top Model for the world, and also acting because I've always been such a ham and just love being around people. And then my best friend was like, hey, why don't you try out for this show, America's Next Top Model? And it was kind of a crazy time because I had just got diagnosed with lupus. And I was a junior going to Cal State Northridge. So I had to drop out of college, which was like a big no-no for my family. But it was kind of like the best decision that I made.
Were you modeling while you were in college before, or the show was sort of your first foray into?
Yeah. I mean, I dabbled here and there, they're like, oh, you're cute. Let's put you in something. I'm like, okay, right. I'm not going to say no. But, But yeah, I would say it was my first professional look into the industry. And if I can go back, my mom, she studied at FITM in New York. So I was reading Vogue magazines when I was little and obsessed with the fashion industry. And we came from humble beginnings. So I was always designing things that I wanted to wear, but we couldn't afford. And I always had a love affair with the fashion industry.
And how much of the lupus diagnosis, I would imagine sort of the timing was really challenging, because you get this lupus diagnosis, which takes some of the pressure off you. Now you figured out what's going on. Where was your head at physically with the lupus diagnosis?
Yeah, so it was kind of a crazy time, right? Because I'm in college, I get diagnosed with lupus. I am familiar with it because my grandmother had it. So I remember seeing her struggles with arthritis, medication, just trying to find the right chemical cocktail, as I call it. And then getting on the show, having to drop out of college, which is really stressful because you have to have that conversation with your parents. And then also trying to figure out my medication dosage. So it was pretty rapid. I'd say I got diagnosed in spring, and then I was on the show in winter.
And the stress, I'm assuming, exacerbates any symptoms. I mean, I'm sure it made taming the disease a little more difficult.
Yeah, like when I first got diagnosed with lupus, it was really bad because I couldn't even open up peanut butter jars or wash my hair. I remember going like this to just wash my hair so I can assist my joints. And then I finally got on, medication that helped, which was Plaquenil at the time. And then just going on the show was, like you said, it exasperated it. And but I also wanted to make the best out of it. So I was like, I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna go for it, and we'll see what happens.
And you didn't tell the show this was a recent
Yeah,
diagnosis,
there
right?
was a claim in our contract that said you couldn't be sick, and so I wanted to hide it because obviously I wanted a career. I sacrificed so much at this point. So I was like, okay, I'm just going to sneak my medication. And, my hair was falling out at the time. I really kind of was a mess. Like there is an episode where my mom ends up coming on the show and they like kind of out me. They're like, we know something's going on. And I'm like, okay, I have lupus. And they're like, what's lupus? And I'm like, oh my God. And I was like, hey, if I go down like that, it's like, what are they going to kick me off for being ill? Like I think it was more of a, making sure that I wasn't going to die on the show. But after that, what was so ironic is that America's Next Top Model had somebody who had something like some type of illness, which was great because it was a good platform for whatever disease that was. And it definitely was a good platform for lupus without me even knowing, because so many people reach out to me even till this day and are kind of reliving what I went through, like when you're first being diagnosed.
Yeah, no, I remember. I remember when it broke and the news broke, and every lupus organization in the country called you, and but I think at the time there weren't that many people talking about lupus, and that when Lupus LA started, that was one of our missions was get Hollywood to talk about lupus, because to put lupus in the public eye as much as possible really was it was part of my theory that would help turn eyeballs to the disease, and it worked. I mean, we've had a lot of success. You were a big part of that, and I think the way your story unfolded was so real and not scripted and not planned and not strategic. And I think that's what made it so powerful, especially because I think what the show is about, right? This beauty in the industry and taking amazing photos and modeling versus the struggles that a lot of lupus patients have, and seeing your struggle on television, I think it made a real raw impact. And so, so tell me a little bit about how going through that experience changed your perspective on lupus.
Well, it's funny that you say I've always been an extrovert, like wanting to know people, getting to know people, but I don't really I have a very small circle of friends, and I'm kind of a private person, which is kind of funny because I'm in this industry. And so kind of being a guinea pig was like, if I knew what was going to happen, I probably would have never have done it. But I think it was really powerful because my grandmother, when she had lupus, and she was towards the end of, having kidney failure and liver failure, I promised her that I would do something about lupus. I would do something. And, it was kind of funny how I feel like maybe she guided me through, being on America's Next Top Model. I mean, it was stressful. Like you're like up against all these beautiful girls. I've never lived in a house with that many women. I'm more of a like dudes kind of girl. So it was really interesting to hear like all the, the drama and just trying to like fight your way to the top. And I'm like really easygoing. I'm like, hey, if it works out, it works out. But I'm also competitive with myself. So it was just like a really stressful time. And also I forgot to mention, like I was sneaking phone calls. I was asking producers for their phones so I could call Dr. Wallace at the time, which was my doctor. And I'm like, hey, my hair's falling out. Like, am I on the right dosage? And, that's so hard for a doctor to kind of help guide you through that when he can't see you. I was in New York. Dr. Wallace was in LA. I couldn't really call my mom because that had to be part of the confessionals. Gotta love reality television. And, I think one of the producers got fired shortly after that, which I hope wasn't my fault because she really helped me and she felt for me. She, they had, images of hair falling out in the sink or something like that. So it was a stressful time, but it was well worth it. And I was following my goals despite having this disease. It was like, I didn't want to let lupus define who I was.
So how does the show end? And when the show ends for you, what changes? Yeah. What happens?
Well, we got to go back 20 years. I'm going to I'm not going to tell my age, but I didn't win. I was runner up, but I won America's Hearts. I'd like to believe.
Yes, you did.
And I went to New York. I signed with Elite Model Management, and I also signed with an agency in LA. And I did the whole New York thing, which wasn't my vibe. I'm like way too cheerful to be in New York, even though I'm from New Jersey. I lived in California too long.
Right.
I'm like, why are you being mean to me? But then, I booked campaigns. I was in Teen Vogue. I went on to be a spokesperson for the Lupus Foundation of America, which I did some great things that my grandmother would be proud of, and launched like some pretty big campaigns to get lupus in the light. And then I came back to LA and I said, hey, I want to do commercials and acting because that's where I'm not serious enough to do modeling. But I came back, I worked modeling. I did, guest star appearances on like Bold and the Beautiful and some fun sitcoms. And yeah, that's pretty much how it was just like a whirlwind. You're like, all of a sudden, everybody knows your name. I had stalkers. It was like really scary at one point. But the show's syndicated in 150 countries. So when you're at the airport, there's certain countries that like me, I guess. So like shout out to Russia. I don't know. And then also like, all the Southeast Asian, communities as well. And also lupus is prevalent there. So that could also be something.
And so tell me the response you got from lupus patients in general. I know social media was different back then and it's probably harder to get in touch with you back then, but tell me a little bit about the reaction you got, and was it a surprise to you at all?
Yeah, there was like, that's like where my heart is, helping people, helping myself. And so many people started to reach out like, I have lupus, what medication are you on? And, the dialogue started. And then a lot of times when people know that you have lupus and they have a loved one that has lupus, they reach out to you and say, hey, can you help my loved one? Which was great. And I was able to talk to a lot of people. But what I did find, which was interesting, and I don't know if you find this, but people that are newly diagnosed sometimes don't want to necessarily get the help until they decide that they need the help. So I had oftentimes, carved out time to talk to people, and I could just tell like I was just wasting my time. And, because it's hard. Like when you first get diagnosed, everything's devastating. Like, where is my life going to go? Like, how can I pursue this career if I have arthritis or if my hair is falling out, and the same thing I had to deal with. I wore wigs, like all my friends. No, I made it a game because I'm like, oh, this is Wendy. This is Solisha, like all my different personas. The guys that I would date, I'd always say like, oh, it's like, dating 3 girls at one time, just, I had to make fun and just get through it really.
Yep. No, I think that's really important. I'm a huge advocate of humor to, not to block or mask the disease, but to deal I think humor is such an important part of trying to deal with it. And I know what you're saying about newly diagnosed people too, because I get a lot of phone calls that say, hey, can you talk to my sister or my cousin or whatever? And I say, yeah, sure. Here's my number. Here's the email, whatever. And you don't get that phone call. Maybe you get it 3 months later. Maybe you get it, and to me, I'm all about let people come to it when they want to come to it. I also think sometimes they get the diagnosis, they get some medicine, they start to feel better, and they go, okay, it's not going to be that way for me, so I'm not going to talk to that person. And I think I would encourage people to have those conversations as early as you can in your diagnosis, because I think you'll learn some tips and tricks. You'll feel a little better. You'll realize it's not, a death sentence or a purgatory sentence or anything like that. And, but I love the fact that you're open to even having those conversations, because I think that's way better than people searching the internet.
Oh yeah. You could just go down a rabbit hole. I mean, that's with anything, right? With TikTok or Instagram. But the one thing that I think was important for me is I changed my diet, and I became a yoga instructor, and I totally went down the hippie route, because I'm I've always been that way. I don't take Advil when I have a headache. So me getting on medication was a big deal. And I think changing my lifestyle was the biggest benefactor of getting myself healthy. And I think a lot of people don't want to hear that when they first get diagnosed, because it's a lifestyle change. And you really need to know that just in general, even in healthy bodies, we're more than ever before, we're having more cancer, we're having more things because our environment is toxic. Now deal with that with somebody that's already sick. And then you have so many other factors.
Yeah, no, I totally hear you on that. All right, so let's do this. I'm going to take a break. Then we're going to come back and we're going to talk about, we'll catch up 20 years and talk about what's going on now with you. And I want to hear more about your lifestyle choices and things like that. So we'll be right back with Mercedes Yvette.
Please visit our online store at lupusla.org. By purchasing Lupus LA products, you are directly supporting lupus patients and their families. For more information, visit lupusla.org.
Hello and welcome back to the Your Story, Our Fight podcast from Lupus LA. We are talking to Mercedes Yvette. And before the break, we were talking about lifestyle changes. So tell me, what's worked really well for you? What have you tried and said, that's not for me?
Yeah. So when I first got diagnosed, I started taking echinacea, and that is a big no-no when you have autoimmune disease. And I started seeing a naturopath while taking my Western medication, and that's another big no-no. I remember going to college and I was cross-eyed. I could not see, and I was super sensitive to light. So I learned that I found the right doctor to help work with both my Western and Eastern medication. I did yoga. That was the biggest thing. I remember kind of having blood in my throat the first time I did downward dog, because I wasn't used to, I've been an athlete, but then after I got diagnosed with lupus, it was very difficult to work out. So I started swimming. Because that was easy on the joints. And then once I built up the strength and my lupus was more under control, I started to do yoga. And yoga is so amazing because it twists all the liver and all the kidneys, and it brings out toxins. And yoga has been practiced through centuries. So this is an age-old tradition, nothing new. Actually, we practice more yoga in the United States than they do in India, which is kind of crazy. But that really helped bring out those toxins. And then I just started looking into different books like Dr. Wheel and Brooke, and just changing my lifestyle to more of a Mediterranean diet, cut out processed foods. Now it's trending, now it's everywhere, which is great. But it's also horrible because everybody's getting sick. But
right.
Yeah. So
now, have you stuck with all of that? Do you still do yoga? Do you still? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I don't work out as much as I'd like to now that I have kids, but I have two young kids, so it's
Hmm.
challenging, and I have a very challenging job. So I would love to say I work out all the time, but I don't. That's the reality. Like twice a
Yeah.
week, I do wake up at 5 o'clock in the morning to keep that commitment, but I would love to work out every day. I just don't have the
Yeah.
time, and I'm exhausted being a mom.
Yeah. Tell me about having kids and lupus. What were your concerns before you had kids? Did any of those concerns materialize?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. I knew I wanted boys because I know that it's less likely for boys to develop lupus. And, that was just something that I learned through my reading. But I'm always concerned. They have health issues with breathing in general. It has nothing to do with lupus, it's just our environment and allergies. And when I was pregnant, a lot of times women go into remission. So I was like on top of my game. I felt beautiful. Like everybody's like, oh, let me get the door for you. And I was like,
Right.
oh, great. Yeah. This is like, can I be pregnant with the rest of my life? I mean,
Right.
other women are like, no, get this out of me. But I loved it. I was like making money modeling. I was healthy. And then the baby comes out, and that's when, the hits the fan.
Lupus, right? Yeah.
So that's when you're like, oh, like then your hair starts falling out and all your glow starts leaving. But luckily I was fine, and my babies are healthy, and they know. My oldest one knows I have lupus, and we've talked about it, but nothing scary. But I think
Hmm.
it's important for him to know, if anything does happen, and to encourage people who are sick and to look out for them and to help them.
Hmm. Totally. I couldn't agree more. And did you do anything different medication wise or medical? Like, did you have to go through a lot of prep before you got pregnant? And
Yeah.
so I know a lot of lupus patients, when they're first diagnosed, that's their biggest question and fear.
Yeah, prep wise, no, but I had to go to the doctor every 2 weeks because after 35, you are considered geriatric. So that's just one concern. And then I have lupus. So they had to keep checking to make sure that the embryo was okay and that amniotic fluid wouldn't be, I guess, spilling out. That's probably not the best way to say it, but yeah, I didn't like that. And then I also asked about radiation with the people at Cedars-Sinai because I wanted to know what level their machine was at. Like, I'm crazy, and I like research everything. And I'm like, okay, you need to see me in every 2 weeks. Tell me why. What is this? What is this machine doing? Like, is it going to affect the baby? And I thought it was a little bit too much, in my opinion, from having two kids and going through that and having absolutely healthy pregnancies. But I know that they have to take precaution, but it's always great for if you are pregnant to ask a lot of questions, even if they are saying something, always question everything.
Yeah. Be your own advocate for sure.
Yeah.
Okay. So tell me about this new career you've embarked on. I know you're
Yes.
still acting and modeling, but tell
Yeah.
me also what the new career.
Yeah, during the pandemic, I really, it was actually right before the pandemic. I wanted just a career change. The industry in itself is changing so much, the entertainment industry, whether they're going over to New Mexico or New Jersey to shoot, or just the work is a lot different or very celebrity driven. So I just already saw that sign coming a long time ago, and I wanted to do something else that made me happy. And I had my own jewelry business for 5 years, and I realized I was really great at making things and also running a business and doing sales. And so I reached out to one of my friends, and he worked in the furniture industry. And then I sub-repped for him. And then I found myself providing tailored furnishings and accessories and home decor solutions to the design community, representing like high-end manufacturers and like bringing exquisite products to life in the residential and commercial spaces. So that's kind of what I do now. And I love it. I am my own business person, as I always have been as a model and actor. And it's very similar. I work with creatives. I do less creating, more curating. But I love what I do. It feeds my family, and it gives me the flexibility to take breaks when I need, and as well as, pursue modeling and acting when it shows up at my door.
And have you noticed have you met any, has there been any Lupus connections through that role, through that switch, sort of getting more into the corporate space, and how has that changed?
Well, the design community is, like, I would say 80% women, and a lot. So just, it's nice. It's refreshing dealing with a lot of women, because we all have kids. We're all under the same grind. We're full-time moms and full-time executives. And also, I've met a lot of women who have autoimmune diseases, and we do speak about that and how that works and is integrated with our job. And I think that's important when you have lupus, is finding a career that works for you, like something that you're able to take breaks in when you need to, and to still be successful.
And does adding that job increase your stress level and your time commitments? And do you have to balance that out with trying to stay healthy?
Yeah. Anybody that is going to tell me that they're balanced, you come here, like, besides you having $1 million. Other than that, like, yeah, I'm always struggling for balance, and like eating and making sure I'm eating correctly, making sure I'm taking breaks. Like, as a mom, you're like always taking care of everyone else except for yourself.
Is there guilt associated with having to manage your illness? Because I also have 2 young kids, and my 4-year-old son wants to play tackle football in the backyard all the time, and that's not the easiest thing for me to do. He's pretty small, so I can tackle him, but he doesn't quite understand yet. He knows about lupus, and he knows, since it's such a big part of my daily life, but do you find yourself, I find myself kind of not hiding it from him, but sort of making adjustments that he may or may not even notice to sort of accomplish what he wants, but also make sure that I take care of myself.
Yeah, I'm very honest with my kids. I talk to them like adults, and so they know. Like, my 2-year-old, I picked him up the other day. He goes, "I'm heavy. You should put me down." And I was like, "You're so right." Like they guide me, to be honest. And because he's like 35 pounds, he's like pure. We call him our little cinder block. Because I always say, "Oh,
my
you're
4-year-old's
too heavy."
My 4-year-old's 39 pounds.
So there you go. My husband's really tall, so we have really giant kids. Like, my 7-year-old comes up to here.
We're all short people. Yeah.
Well, you're lucky in that aspect, right? Like, and they know mommy's hands hurt sometimes. So if anything, they're a vehicle to my help. I think my grandmother hid a lot from us, so that we didn't have to, but helping her was so much better. Like, you, as a kid, you want to help your parents. You want to be able to, and no one is perfect, like they definitely know when I'm tired and I need to rest. And I said, I'll come back when I can do it. And luckily I have a very able husband that helps out, and he's amazing. And I have a village. My mom helps me out, and I'm so blessed in that way. Not everybody has that. And I probably wouldn't be as happy as I am if I didn't have my village. It really, like, nowadays, everybody should have a village, friends or family or whatever you can build to help. And I think that's for anyone, not just people with lupus. It's like everybody's taking on so much of these struggles. And in African villages and other places around the world, it's all about how you contribute to a community.
Well, you definitely contribute to the lupus community, and I really thank you for what you've gone through, what you've done, what you've brought to raising lupus awareness and helping lupus patients. And I really appreciate you doing this podcast. So thanks very much.
Thank you, Adam. I appreciate sharing my story.
On behalf of the entire team at Lupus LA, we thank you for joining the Your Story, Our Fight podcast. Please tune in, spread the word, and come back for more inspiring lupus stories. I'm your host, Adam Selkowitz, wishing you good health, and to always remember, your story is our fight.